Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us in our fifth iteration, our penultimate iteration of the Building Resilient Farming Systems webinar series. My name is Lucy Tomasini. I'm a project manager with the Grower Group Alliance and the Southwest WA Drought Resilience Adoption and Innovation Hub. It's quite a mouthful, so we more familiarly call it the Southwest WA Drought Hub. So in this series, we're highlighting 6 projects in our transformational program. And this webinar today is brought to you by the Southwest WA Drought Hub, which is led by the Grower Group Alliance. So before we get started, I'll do a very quick introduction to the hub, who we are, what we do. So the hub has been around since 2021 and is part of 8 hubs nationally funded through the Australian government's Future Drought Fund. The aim of these hubs is really to provide regionally relevant information and support to help farmers and regional communities prepare for and adapt to the impacts of drier, warmer seasons. So we very much focus on collaboration in the agricultural ecosystem. We bring together researchers, agribusiness, farmers, grower groups, industry leaders, and so forth to make sure that agricultural research is impactful, accessible, and to drive innovation. So through funding from the Future Drought Fund, we sought project EOIs from hub consortium partners that would investigate concepts that contribute to evolving agricultural systems in Western Australian agriculture. So each of these projects is led by a hub consortium partner and delivered in collaboration with growers, grower groups, industry experts, and regional organizations to help ensure that the work is practical, relevant, and very much grounded in real-world farming contexts. So while the primary focus of these projects is on generating new knowledge, tools, and approaches, some of these innovations may, over time, contribute to broader shifts in how agricultural systems operate and also build resilience at multiple levels. So without further ado, today we'll be highlighting a project led by ECU. Sorry, could you please mute yourself if you're not muted already? Sorry, thank you. So this project is led by ECU and Maaman Marra Boodjar, and it explores how Aboriginal agricultural knowledge can be integrated into modern farming systems across Western Australia. It brings together traditional owner knowledge, farmer experience, and research to look at how culturally grounded, place-based practices can support drought resilience, environmental health, and more sustainable land management. So today we'll be hearing from Professor David Blake from ECU's Centre for People, Place and Planet. We'll also be hearing from Clint Hansen, who's the founder of Maaman Marra Boodjar, and we'll be hearing from Professor Janine Joyce, also from the ECU's Centre for People, Place and Planet. So without just a few housekeeping things before I pass over to Dave, please make sure you're on mute. You can leave your camera on or off. We don't mind. This session will be recorded and it will be put up on our website afterwards. So you can rewatch it or you can reshare it for those who weren't able to join. There will be a Q&A session at the end of Dave, Clint, and Janine's presentations. So if you have a question, please feel free to pop it into the Q&A tab at the top, or hold on to it and ask it yourself when the time comes. Clint has pre-recorded his session, so you'll be hearing from him later on. All right, without further ado, passing over to Dave. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy, and hi to everyone online, and thanks for joining the webinar today. Myself, Clint, and Janine will be talking about our project, which was Transformational Aboriginal Agricultural Methods, or TAM for short. But I might start by just giving you some context about how this project came about in the beginning, because I think it's important for an understanding of this type of work overall. So it began, I was doing some work, some research with some farmers down in Katanning, looking at soil health, and they were using a range of farm management practices from anywhere from organic farming through regenerative agriculture and conventional industrial agriculture. And they were neighbouring farms, and we were looking at how their management practices influence soil health. And we put in a Future Drought Fund grant application. At the same time, Clint Hansen from Maaman, Marra, Boodjar, and another Aboriginal colleague, Ken Haywood, approached ECU to have some scientific input into a research project they were working on, which was looking at culturally informed landscape rehydration. And again, we put in a Future Drought Fund application at the time. Unfortunately, both those applications were unsuccessful, but we realised that both groups were actually, there was a lot of overlap between what we're trying to do, and ultimately both groups were trying to improve the health of country and in particular improve soil health. And so we decided to run a workshop at ECU to bring everyone together to discuss how we might work together. And so we spent a day in a workshop, and we came up with a program of research, and from that the TAM project was born. So today we're going to talk about the three different probably phases of the project. So the first one will be Clint talking about culturally informed landscape rehydration. I'll talk a bit about the baseline monitoring and the scientific monitoring that we did around soil health and vegetation. And then Janine will be talking about the relationships and how we built a framework for integrating different knowledge systems. The project is place-based and situated on two farms, Gimlet Ridge with Rod and Katrina Butler, and Willamby Farms, which is owned by a consortium led by David Martin and managed by Phil Logue. Both of those farms sit about 20 kilometres north of Perenjori, and Perenjori itself is about 350 kilometres northeast of Perth. It's quite marginal. It's very low rainfall, but when the rainfall does occur, it can be quite destructive in terms of soil health. It can take away a lot of the topsoil and result in large-scale erosion and erosion gullies being formed. And so the project, a part of the project was how can we actually control this flow of water? And we were doing that through a cultural lens, so through culturally informed landscape rehydration. And in this case, Clint installed some leaky weirs and used his understanding of country to be able to do that in an informed way. So next we'll hear from Clint about that process.
Hi, Wanju. Hello and welcome. My name's Clint Hansen. I'm the founder of Maaman, Marra, Boodjar. I'm here to implement Aboriginal agricultural methods from early settlement. In our early days before settlement, we used fire and water as a tool. But in modern farming techniques now, those tools have changed to become dangerous to agriculture. So we use those types of tools to nurture the ecosystem and all the systems that Aboriginal people got to do over thousands of years. We had the fire was there to regerminate and regenerate new life so we can get other plants and animals to come in so we can actually gather food by hunting and gathering. We did use agricultural systems, and I think with modern farming practices now, we are clearing too much land and we're not letting that land become wealthy. And once that land becomes wealthy, then we become wealthy. But I think we're using too much modern technology where we can use both Aboriginal agriculture and modern farming practices now together to show that we can use those tools, because I think we've cleared too much land over the years and we've created a rooftop or a canopy where the water is not getting enough time to soak into the plant system to cause growth in different ecosystems of our planet. So I think, by clearing too much land, we've caused so much erosion. Not only that, we created so many runoffs, so our river systems and lake systems are turning into disaster areas where we've got to try and resurrect that and bring that back to life if we can work together as a different dynamics of agriculture. To understand, how Aboriginal people feel about the land is that when we were nomads, we moved around, so we were able to be in tune with the land. But then we've got another agriculture that is not, well, it is an advanced agriculture where we are growing things so we can have more and more food to put on the table and things like that. But in our history, we grazed and moved on the land, but now we are able to grow crops and put them on the plates and on the shopping shelves and all that now to give us food that we need. But I think we're going into global warming where our country is bare and so hot. So if we put a lot more trees and plants back on that barren land that we've stripped and left bare, so if we put growth back on there, I think then our planet will thrive again, and we'll be able to look at different dynamics where we can use what would say, we can use broadacre farming, we can use holistic farming, we can use regenerative farming, and we can use Aboriginal farming all in one. And that way we can sort of look at what we can bring into the near future of agriculture. So, severe erosion of country. This practice came in because of clearing, because of cropping. So it allowed lots of this bare ground to be arid. When we have rainfalls and floods and that, you cause the severe erosion to country. By collecting rocks and position them into place where the eroded areas are, we can slow down and prepare the banks so we can combat the erosion of banks and slow the water flow down and keeping the moisture there. Filled with rocks and sand, when we have a downpour, we have the debris, the silt, the topsoils, the seeds all collect up in the rocks, and that holds that up, and that allows that to germinate and recover and helps the erosion to mend itself. Right, construction of water on country. So what we're doing is slowing it down, as you can see. We've put a small wall down the bottom where we can hold the water up, because water level, when you slow down the water flow, the water level keeps level itself, so it goes back into the embankment that we've already created when we cause all these fine blockages. As you can see, the water flow comes in and it slows everything down. It's not chopping out the banks, it's collecting all the silt, the debris and seeds and that to give us more growth, more plant life, which will help slow down the erosion and gives the water more time to soak into the ground and gives the plants and that a good drink. As you can see, I've used different types of methods to cover some of the bare areas. I've used hay and seeds, and the water works its way into stopping it from flowing directly into our main stream, which is these ones here, where you can see that we've slowed it down, and we started getting ground cover. And this ground cover comes up during the warmer months, summer, in Bunaroo, and which is the 6 seasons of the Aboriginal 6 seasons. It just slows everything down and keeps that grass and that growing, so we don't have so much of this flat, barren country, and the erosion becomes like that because of the wind, rain, and machinery. As you can see with this one here, during the summer, we have stopped a lot of the eroded stuff, so that allows the plants and that to keep that country wealthy. The root system is, still there, so it's held that up. So if we have a summer rain, it will hold up all those places where the ground's not going to be bare and causing erosion like we have back further up in those videos that in that photo shot that we had. Just looking at one of the photos of this blockages of what we've applied, it shows you that the water is held up and it's slowing it like a stepping stone effect. So that's keeping the water there on country and keeping the moisture there. So, and that allows all these little plants that, as you can see, start growing and producing on the banks of where the water's already flown through. And the same through with, just keeping all these little smaller plants and animals doing all their jobs. So, and that brings back wealth and happiness to the country, and how we sort of can say, just change the dynamics of farming. We're not trying to take over all of the areas. It's just trying to slow it down and keep water quality much better for our human consumption, as well as wealth and a healthier country. I'd like to thank ECU for their scientific knowledge by using the weathering station, putting in all these ports where we can get moisture, rainfall, methane, all those other scientific things that allows us to combine them together. Thanks for all the work that ECU and GGA and WARC have helped put this program together. And we want to try and keep researching on what we have put here together on this on these properties to help future science in different categories of Aboriginal science and modern practice science of agriculture, just so that we can move to the future together as a group, not as individuals.
I should have mentioned that unfortunately Clint couldn't present in person today, but he should be joining us for the Q&A session at the end of this webinar, so we can ask him questions then. So Clint told us about the leaky weirs he installed as part of the landscape rehydration process. And so around that, we built some monitoring to try and understand how it was improving some soil metrics like organic matter in the soil, pH, soil moisture, and then vegetation biomass, those sorts of things. So we set up a monitoring design. There were 3 sites built around erosion gullies. So there was 2 erosion gullies on Gimlet Ridge, and then 1 erosion gully on Willamby. And on each of those, we set up 6 plots for each site. And they were 1 by 1 metre plots. And at each plot, we took shallow and deep soil samples and did traditional soil analysis on those. And then we also sent some of that soil for soil microbiome analysis, which is still being analysed at the moment. And then in addition to that, at each of the plots, we took a soil carbon gas flux measurement, and we did that 6 times to align with the Noongar seasons. And then we also set up an Internet of Things network that included a whole suite of sensors, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then finally, we complemented all that with some drone surveys that recorded multispectral LiDAR data, and that was used to inform us about differences in vegetation between the sites and pre and post installation of the leaky weirs. Sorry, this is a really bad table, but basically on the left-hand side, we have the soil metrics for Gimlet Ridge. And you can just see that when you compare to them to the left-hand side, which is Willamby, that we have higher amounts of organic matter in the soil at Gimlet Ridge. We have improved soil moisture. The pH tends to be high and we have higher electrical conductivity. But this is probably a reflection that Gimlet Ridge has been under regenerative practices for the last 20 years, whereas Willamby is transitioning to a regenerative mode as a soil carbon project at the moment. So those soil metrics are probably a reflection of that, but we're continuing our monitoring to see what impact the leaky weirs will have on soil health into the future. As I said, we set up some monitoring soil gas flux where we measured carbon dioxide and methane. And then we had an Internet of Things sensor network where we strapped a modem to a tree powered by a lithium-ion 12-volt battery and a solar panel. And we had a whole suite of sensors, which included soil moisture sensors at different depths in the soil profile, rainfall gauges, and temp and humidity sensors. And they were sending information to this modem, which was then sending it back to us every 15 minutes, 24 hours, 7. So we have quite an extensive data set about what's happening in terms of rainfall and soil moisture and groundwater at those sites. So in terms of the soil gas flux, but most of the sites, well, both sites or farms are emitting carbon dioxide, and we can see that in the wetter parts of the year, we tend to, we do see some variation, and it tends to be an increase at Gimlet Ridge as opposed to Willamby in terms of CO2 emissions. In terms of methane, we see that Willamby tends to be an emitter of methane, but Gimlet Ridge actually is sequestering methane at that site. So that's interesting. And when we get our soil microbiome results, hopefully that we'll be able to investigate that a bit deeper. Soil moisture, again, we saw some differences between the sites. In the surface, 30 to 40 centimetres at Gimlet Ridge, it was very dry and we didn't see very much soil moisture at all, but we did see soil moisture deeper in the profile. So around that 60 to 90 centimetres, there was soil moisture present in the soil. In the surface, we see it respond quite quickly to rainfall events. And the red line indicates when we installed the leaky weirs, and we can actually see that there's quite dramatic changes in the soil moisture profile following rainfall after those leaky weir installations. At Willamby, slightly different. We don't see as much moisture deeper in the profile, but we still see the same responses in terms of surface moisture to rainfall. And again, we see a response after the leaky weir installation to some quite significant rainfall as well. We'll be monitoring these. We've still got these sensor networks in, and we're continuing to monitor them for hopefully 1 to 2 years to see the impact of those leaky weirs. As I said, we did some drone surveys. We calculated, I think, 6 different vegetation indices from that data. And this is Gimlet Ridge, Willamby, and basically what we see is that Gimlet Ridge has much higher biomass or vegetation cover, and that it responds quicker after rainfall events or after the wet season. We see a greater response at Gimlet Ridge as opposed to Willamby. And of course, that will influence the soil health and carbon gas fluxes as well. And we had another Aboriginal company work with us in D-Division, and they captured LiDAR. And the reason we're using LiDAR is it's very high resolution topographic information. So it'll tell us, or allow us to quantify the changes in erosion that we're seeing post the installation of the leaky weirs. And now I'd like to hand over to Janine, who's going to talk about the integration of different knowledge systems.
Hello everybody, it's great to be here. My computer buffers a little bit. If that happens, I'll turn my picture off and we'll see how we go. So my part of the project was really to do the listening, to look at yarning, to bring a social science perspective through. What we found about yarning is there's many different ways to kind of do this. In our project, we really found that this was the way that we got a lot more information around agricultural methods, but also about relationships between people over time and over generations, and gave us a lot of information around country, relationship to country. And it also gave us a lot of that knowledge that was unmeasurable in terms of cultural, spiritual, intuitive, energetic kind of stories. So the deeper stories about the land in terms of cultural relationships between settlers, Aboriginal peoples of the land now, contemporary stories. So it was a really powerful kind of part of the project. What it led us to was a TAM framework, which was kind of, if you liked, looking at the different interviews and understanding the common themes that were running through all the different people involved in the project. And obviously the key theme was what Clint and Davis talked about, that rehydration by slowing the runoff of water through the landscape. That was the key goal. The rebuilding of soil carbon and soil microbiome in response to concern to long-term decline in soil carbon levels. The fact that we were bringing two knowledges together to improve soil health in agriculture. The contouring of landscape alongside no-till, no-kill, the rehydrating and repairing and restoring of our land for the future, and the increased plant and creature diversity. And also the big finding, which was that healing and repairing of landscape involved healing and reconciliation with Aboriginal colleagues and communities. We saw that what we had in common was a real concern, a real desire and concern around the legacy for the future. We understood that landscape held the stories of colonization, that we saw that agriculture, history, and relationships were intertwined. We couldn't separate them out, which is what we kind of expect in a holistic project like this. We saw that Aboriginal knowledge views on agriculture as part of a whole interconnected ecosystem. We saw the practical use of ecosystem regenerative farming, and we saw that that current agricultural practices have created some problems. Bringing everybody together wasn't such an easy task all the time, so we had a lot of diversity, but by bringing everybody together, it also gave us the strength in terms of deeper knowledge. So the Aboriginal landscape knowledge and cultural protocols sat alongside soil science and farming practice. It meant that we were able to prioritise the community's ability to shape project questions, not just the project outputs. And it meant that learning occurred in multiple directions rather than sort of flowing from the science experts to others. So it really was a very collaborative, co-designed process where we all learnt from each other. And so even very experienced people on the country were learning from each other around different kind of practices and different kind of fauna and flora and all sorts of things. One of the things that kind of added to this was the process of building deep relationship with Aboriginal families in the area. And in the process of that, we found that trust sort of developed, and the depth of stories and the detail in stories and the usefulness in the ideas and the problem solving together became really kind of rich. I guess what we learned from this project was the importance of starting well and framing a project together and building that trust face to face. That was where the magic really happened. It was really important to listen carefully to how our Aboriginal community members and Clint and farmers described drought, water, and landscape change. It was about not rushing into defining the problem, even though we clearly knew what the goal was. It recognised that different groups saw the problem differently, and sometimes it took a few starts. So I guess we had people coming into this project who had never been into it in a science research project before, and everybody had different goals and different timelines and different expectations. And so we had to revisit that multiple times until we kind of got ourselves on the same page. And that actually was to be expected and as part of these kind of co-design programs. Coming together on the country and doing the work, co-generating the knowledge, it was really a balance of different ways of knowing and measuring success. So right at the start of this project, Dave says to me, "I don't know anything about your science." And I said, "I'm not sure I know much about yours either." And so really, I think it was the fact that we had so much difference between everybody that we all had to take that ability to listen deeply and learn from each other. We also had to realize that, dealing with country, seasons come, land, temperature, climate events happen. They don't stick with the time frame, as you all know. And so we didn't always get a straight line in terms of our progress. And in fact, it was probably more circular. We also, in terms of the social science process, we sort of just had to, conversations just moved where they needed to go. And we needed to kind of keep maintaining, you know, connection and relationship engagement over time. And we also had to balance the competition between, you know, like I said before, the kind of the unmatching the needs of country season, practical work, and funding timelines. And we just had to sit with discomfort because it takes time to trust people enough to kind of to disagree in a safe way. It takes time to kind of disagree and know that that's not actually going to stop the project going forward at all. So we really, really worked hard, and we were really stoked with where we got to, really pleased. And that's really that revisiting and strengthening that common goal of the project. And I think what we saw was some really lovely practical things, like Clint and one of the farmers, Rod, you know, they developed a passion for reading landscape and asking questions that maybe sometimes we don't have time to ask. Like, why is this tree curling around this way? Pondering water, root, disturbance, energy, learning to nourish and love it. So even though we had a really practical project, even though we were all very busy, even though it was a very short project, there was this time for this kind of learning, engaging with country deeply. So what do we learn? Again, probably the main thing, and may not be a surprise to a lot of people in the room, start with relationships, not methods. So any researcher, that's where, I mean, I think anything, you start with the relationships. Involve the Aboriginal communities and families and placeholders early and meaningfully. Make space for multiple ways of knowing, multiple ways of understanding. Be prepared for not knowing, be prepared for ambiguity and non-linear process. It takes time for everything to get on the same page. And, you know, treating trust, learning and empowerment as real outcomes in an agricultural project. That was perhaps a little bit unusual, and maybe not, but that was really important. What one of the farmers said was, you know, that they really enjoyed bringing, you know, working alongside Aboriginal knowledges, our Aboriginal colleagues and friends and families. Really interesting to kind of bring the landscape knowledges with farming systems and put all that together. And I guess there was also this valuing of, you know, capturing how everybody was feeling, how everybody was reacting with each other and to each other, and how that was then showing up in terms of the reaction and response to the environment and country. Back over to you, Lucy, I guess.
Thank you very much, Janine, Dave, and Clint. That was a really, really great rundown of the project. Great to hear about all the various components that were at work in this project and how those married together, you know, the cultural knowledge and Aboriginal methods, the data, the science monitoring behind it, and then the, you know, social science, and how important strengthening relationships was to this project. I think that's learning that we can really apply in our life and in various other projects and work. So thank you very much for that. All right, without further ado, we're going to go into the Q&A session. Let me just... So if you have any questions, please pop them up into the Q&A tab. There's just a little button that you'll see that says Q&A. You can either write them down there, or you can just pop your hand up and you can ask them yourselves. Let me just... to start us off, though, I will ask, it would be great to, as you were saying, Janine, the importance of relationships. It would be great to delve a bit deeper into that aspect of the project. So what the key learnings from the development of relationships in this project were, you know, not just the practices, but what did the relationships, how big a role that they play in improving, you know, landscape resilience or in this project's work?
I think what they did was it built, you know, that trust, you know, it built the trust to share different ideas and different ways of knowing and different ways of seeing, different kinds of ways of reading country, different ways of understanding that we couldn't go onto country without an understanding of history and reconciliation and everything that country kind of holds. So I think that, I hope I'm not going around in circles, but I think what it did was it gave us a deeper engagement with country. It gave us a deeper observation of what was happening on country, and it gave us a deeper capability to explore that with each other and say some of the stupid things, or say some of the intuitive things, or say that, you know, I don't know if I'm right about this, but my instinct is this. So some of that deep knowledge. And so it was really kind of gorgeous for me as a non-farmer to listen to farmers who've been on their country for generations, going, this is new knowledge to me. And these were people who really deeply know their space, know their land, know their crops, know their animals, to be sort of sitting with Clint going, hey, this is different. Or when talking to, you know, some of the Aboriginal families and them trusting us to give deeper knowledge. So it really was you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what you have to share until you have that kind of platform of trust to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I think Clint has been able to join us for the Q&A, which is great. Not sure if your tech is working, Clint, but also feel free to jump in, Clint, if you have anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, hello.
Sure,
How are you all?
We're good, thank you, Clint.
It's
Hey,
good to
Clint.
be able to talk to everyone. Yeah, no, it's been quite a journey, but just trying to break down different scientific barriers with different agricultural beliefs, I suppose, and just enjoying a research that was probably haven't been done before, but it's just gathering momentum from different walks of life, I suppose. People are just learning how to join different agricultures together. And hopefully we can bring that to the future of farming practices.
Great, thank you, Clint. We do have a question from Dimity Boggs. Not sure if you'd like to ask it yourself, but I'm happy to read it out for you. It's around, this is probably more for Dave, was the soil salinity measured at Willamby high enough for there to be concerns around concentrating salt in the leaky weir waters held up on landscape and exasperating secondary salinity? The question's in the Q&A tab if you'd like to have a look.
Yeah. Hi, Dimity, thanks for that. So we are monitoring soil salinity. They're not, according to the farmers, they're not areas where they're traditionally concerned about salt being a problem, but we are monitoring it. Again, the leaky weirs don't hold water for really extended periods of time. Again, we're monitoring that to see over a few rainfall events or over a couple of seasons how that actually plays out in the long-term hydrology of these systems. But it doesn't appear to be a concern at the moment, but we are monitoring it. So.
Great, thank you. And Renee is asking about, she's thanking you for the presentation, but also asking about the next steps.
Janine or Clint, do you want to talk to what the next steps might be?
Yeah, the next steps we're trying to gather more research, but even though things don't happen instantly, but people are wanting things to happen instantly, but sometimes we've got to rely on nature to give us that helping hand and let it do it at its own pace. Back to that last question that you got, Dave, some of our country is totally different, so we're going to have different drainage and water systems and soil samples and all that to deal with, because we are out at Willamby where we're doing loam, and yet if you're closer to the coast then you got sand. So there's a difference between what our Aboriginal knowledge and cultures had taught us over the years as we were nomads on the land. So we had to
what I can say was look at it and try and follow through on how we would look at it in a scientific way.
Can I add, thanks Renee, thanks Clint. Can I add in that the next steps for us is to share what we found? So there's a documentary that we'll release. There's obviously a research article. So we want to kind of share the impact of what we've done. Ideally, alongside that, we'll also be doing additional grant applications, because ideally what we achieved in 18 months, or what country showed it was capable of doing in 18 months, was really hopeful. But we need longitudinal studies. Like if we're looking in health sciences, we want longer. We want to see what happens. So we really want to look at a bigger project. Dave, is there anything you'd like to add onto that as well?
Just that we do have our sensor network that's still operating, so we're still monitoring our sites out there. Whilst we are looking for additional research funding to continue this, ideally at this site for the TAM project, we'd like to continue at least 1 to 2 years to give us a longer term data set and understanding of how it responds. But from that, we also are looking to take the framework that we've developed in terms of integrating different knowledge systems and develop something that we can actually roll out throughout the southwest of WA into other agricultural communities, and to see how it can be adapted and integrated into those communities as well.
Great, thank you all. Camilla, you have a question.
Hello, yes, really interesting presentation. Thank you so much. I've got lots of questions actually. So, but it's my first one is I used to run what EMU, or Ecosystem Management Understanding, which is a similar type of thing in Central Australia with pastoralists in Central Australia. But we, rather than using rocks and branches and things like that, we actually used machinery to build the weirs and things like that. And it was about looking at landscape function across the whole of the station, looking at water flow and where it's going and all those types of things. So a basic question around that is, because I'm wondering if you have any issues with, because you're using rocks and trees, do they, when you get a big rain, do they wash away? Like, do you have a lot of, like you have to go back in and redo the weirs and redo the things afterwards, and there's a lot of maintenance? Or do you find that where you're putting them, it's in a quieter spot so the water flows more gentle?
Great, thank you. Clint.
Yes. With that one, with the water flow, yes, the water depends on the downfall. The rocks and the trees can be moved, but when you get that downfall and it coming off flat ground, you're bringing all the debris and salinity and topsoils and seeds and that. So they will gather into those places where the water is flowing down. So hopefully to keep it on countries, but some of those places that we have done, yes, we do have to repair them. So, you know, we had to redesign some of it to make sure that this does give us enough time for it to repair itself, so the land and the country and nature will bring itself back to where it should have been. So, you know, a lot of the farmers have collected trees, stumps, rocks, and put them in their paddocks and made them look like they're on a mantelpiece. So, you know, they're little trophies that are sitting out there doing nothing. So you put them back on country, and then it changes the whole system and changes agriculture, because that way you're bringing plants and animals and that back to nature itself, instead of relying on us to give them water sources like, you know, drinking water and a building for them to live in. So we're creating their own home and their own environment by restructuring some of the agricultural areas that are so drastically cleared and damaged.
Yeah, thanks for that. Our other question was, with the project, did you have a problem with, or how was, I suppose, the reception? Because we know that with sometimes people but bringing farmers and First Nations people together, sometimes it can be like, oh, I'm not sure if I want to have them on my property. Like, what happens if we come across some sacred sites or things like that? So I'm really interested to see how I love the piece around the relationship building and everything, and how that's going forward, and that can kind of be multiplied out across properties.
Sacred sites and heritage stuff has been portrayed in a bad way. But if you speak to your local Aboriginal people, they should be able to tell you and help you with that. We were pretty lucky because I'd known quite a few of those farmers in that region, and my children and grandchildren, well, that's their country, so that's their land. So I was able to find out where these sites were and to talk to the farmers and just make it sound so it wasn't so ngulu or poisoning, that you can't go there or things like that, and you can work around it. So it's just a matter of speaking to your local Aboriginal people in that region and find out some of our history and where these sites are, so you can work around them or you can work near them. Like I say, it's just a matter of having a conversation. And yes, we did have some hiccups, but we managed to get through that. That's why it was a research program.
Yeah. And can I add in, Clint? The hiccups were really just about relationship building, right? Because, Clint had deep trust in the space, and Rod and Clint, Gimlet Ridge, that farm, there was really deep connection. And Phil, the farm manager at Willamby, had been working really strongly and had really strong relationship and connection and history with the families coming onto Willamby. He was part of that process of people just having free access to come and to camp and hunt and gather traditional foods, but it was a really cool relationship, and so we benefited from that. But there were times where people went, hey, we're not sure we understand the project, and then we needed just to sit down and come together and just be able to be transparent. And we also had to have the flexibility to stop, to kind of manage, like you've got your research projects at universities, you've got your funders. We just had to be really strong about saying we need to stop this part of it until we've sat down and everyone's happy. Everybody understands and we've kind of worked this through. And we might need to bring another consultant in. And just because, Clint has the relationships and the farmers have the relationships, the university coming in, we're different, so sometimes we had to revisit. So that reiterative process of consent, like in other projects, you might just say your consent's bang right at the start. And that's true. We obviously had that, but sometimes you have to revisit and go deeper and really bring more people in. And so that trust building, it's on multiple levels. It's sometimes you slow down to speed up is kind of what we had. Sometimes there's that, it's just a lot of communication and multiple ways.
Yeah, just on that farming sector where you asked about the farmers, a lot of farmers will look over the fence, but I find that modern practices now, everyone seems to need to be told by a professional person instead of using their own common knowledge. I forgot about how the years were when all this common knowledge was just your own practice and how you look at it. And you go to being a social person like we are, or people, we go to certain pubs and clubs and that, and everyone seems to be talking about different things that happens on their properties and that, but no one seems to. And if you do something different, everyone's looking at you as like you're an alien. But even though you're trying to change things, people seem to think you are an alien. But we've got to try and get out of that rut where if you think it's your common knowledge that's telling you something, go feel your common knowledge and your gut feeling and go with it. But people always have that idea that, yes, we've got to be told by a professional person, but do we really need to be told by a professional person? Look at our our own figures ourselves with, say, with our digestive systems and all that. So our immune system is all changed. So is our farming. So what we shove in our mouth, I suppose, is what we build our bodies to. But now we're going into a crave where we've got a problem with plastic. So that's what we've done to the land. We've added different chemicals and things and grasses and all that to it. So I think we need to just sort of look at things and think, hey, let's try and change some of this stuff instead of looking at somebody else's property or looking through somebody else's fence and seeing what they're doing.
Great. Thank you all very much. We have a couple more questions that I'd like to get through. So we have a question about this one's for Clint, what other Aboriginal methods / tools were used other than what Clint showed? For example, rocks, cover soil. What other methods could you highlight?
What was that again, Lucy? Is that for me?
Yeah, it could. Yeah, it's probably for you, Clint.
Yeah, well,
It's
like I say, it depends on the materials. Like it's just rocks and trees and natural. People are using tyres. People are using other things like concrete and all that. So concrete, when you do a concrete thing, it's a strong built structure. But if you use rocks and wood, that allows the dirt to build up and then the water to seep through. So if you're going to put in a concrete structure or a structure that you don't really want the water to move, so that doesn't allow it to filter through. And a lot of times if you're using other, like metal and things like that, well, you've got to wait for that to break down, and that still goes through our water system anyway, so it gradually filters through. But we've got to make sure that we don't use, even though it did come from the ground originally, but we've still got to make sure that it's giving it time to filter through to our water tables underground, where the rocks and the bugs, germs and mites do all their job, so we can get nice clean water. But
great,
yeah,
thank
you
you.
can
And
use
just
different structures.
yeah, great. Just following on from that question, we got one on how the design of the weirs was determined, like the dimensions or the placement.
Well, the dynamics of it all is reading the country, looking at the country and how it ran off, which areas were badly eroded. How could you slow it down to keep the water there? You can divert the water, because water will always travel to its lowest point, above ground and underground. So it's just a matter of looking at it and reading it and see how and where you want that water to lie. Lots of times, we look at hillsides and things like that, and you think, how come there's a natural spring up on the side of the hill, but the rocks has created all that underground. So you got these little air, pockets where the water's going to settle up there and stay there for a long time, and it'll just slowly seep its way down through the rock formation and come out on the ground. And that's why we have these natural underground springs.
Yeah,
And that's
great.
how Aboriginal people had always looked at it. Water was a very important thing, a very important tool we used. It's the same with fire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Thank you, Clint. And another one for you from Fran. She's interested to hear your perspective on the science methods behind the soil quality indicators and how this fits with First Nations knowledge around above and below ground soil health. So the science through via the cultural and functional knowledge.
Oh, well, the salt in our Aboriginal knowledge and our Aboriginal system before computers and everything else came along, Aboriginal people had always said that everything on this planet is a living being. But regardless of what we look through on microscopes and all that through the naked eye that we couldn't see, Aboriginal people already had that knowledge that everything was living and it was all part of the whole system. So, different soil types, different things, different plants come up, different areas. So now in the modern era, we've changed that vegetational areas because we are able to plant trees in areas that they don't normally come from. And they've always kept, kept the system working at its best because it always made sure that we were always looking at nature itself, and nature talked to us, and we sang to it, and we nurtured it, and we looked after it, and we loved it, and we became part of it.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Clint. Thank you to all of you. I think that's all we have time for today. If you have any other questions for Dave, Janine, or Clint, they will be happy to answer any more questions that you have. You'll be able to find their contact details through the link. And you'll also be able to find the recording of this presentation on our website. And so everything is up on there. So thank you again very, very much to Dave, Janine, and Clint. That was a really, really great and insightful presentation. And the learnings from this project are super, super important to continue this collaboration in this space. So thank you very much. If you'd like to hear anything more about the project, this is the QR code to go to the webpage where you'll also find Dave, Janine, and Clint's contact details and the recording. We also have our final webinar session next week, which is on monitoring methane emissions from farm dams. So if you're interested in that, there's a QR code to scan to join that, or you can also find that on our webpage. So thank you again. I'm not sure if Dave, Janine, or Clint, you have anything else to add. But
Just
if
thank you to you, Lucy, and thanks to GTA for all their support.
Thanks, Lucy. It's been a great project. Thanks, everybody, for your time coming to listen. Thanks, Dave and Clint. It's been a great project.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. Thanks to WARC, GGA, David, Lucy, and all the TAM group for a incredible journey that we've all gone on. I hope we can keep this journey still surviving after this great webinar that we've had. Yeah, just thanks everyone, and it's been incredible working with all you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Clint.
Amazing. Thank you all very much. Lots of positivity. All right. Thank you all. See you at the next one.
Thank you so much.